Good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Dennis Horn. I am the Diversity Services Coordinator at the Fresno County Department of Behavioral Health, and you are now tuned in to Hmong Women and Mental Health. This is a panel discussion as a collaborative effort between the Department of Behavioral Health and our community partners. It's a part of our efforts for Women's History Month and uplifting women in mental health and women's mental health issues. So this is in line with our efforts to do so. And today we have featured three incredible Hmong women mental health professionals from the Fresno County area. This is historic in a way. This is something that is not necessarily super common to see, but something that's very important. And these ladies serve a really vital role in helping our community, specifically the Hmong community and Hmong women. So I am not featured on this panel, but our moderator today is Lang Fang from the Fresno Center, and I will at this time turn it over to her and our other esteemed guests.
Great. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Department of Behavioral Health, for this great and amazing opportunity to speak about this. This is something that PK and Cindy and I are just really passionate about. So thank you all for tuning in. Just really quickly, I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Lang. I'm a licensed supervisor in the Welfare to Work Employability Services program here at the Fresno Center. Our program is in partnership with Department of Social Services, and we offer mental health services for our Welfare to Work clients. And then PK and Cindy.
Sure. Thank you, TBH, for giving us this opportunity to share our experiences with the community. My name is Pak Vu. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also the owner of Vu Family Therapy. Thank you.
Yeah, so hello, everyone. A big thank you again to Fresno County DBH for providing this opportunity for all of us. Everybody that is tuning in, all of our viewers as well. Thank you for being here. My name is Cindy Fang. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been practicing for almost 10 years at this point. 5 of those years almost 5 of those years is licensed. I have worked with children, teenagers, families, and adults across multiple settings, including Hmong. Okay. Currently, I am in private practice. I'm found in 2 locations. I'm at Fresno Family Therapy, and then I also own my own private practice as well, just like PK. In addition to that, I provide clinical supervision occasionally with the SPRTP here in Fresno, and I am the current president of the Central Valley, California Association of Play Therapy, and I co-moderate the Hmong Mental Health Network page with Lang here. So I do a lot of different things.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you for rounding that out. Oh, Cindy, that list, very impressive. Hey, I can be cheerleaders too, yes? Just wanted to go over just a little bit, just kind of like house rules. We wanted to kind of just share with the public here that we are speaking from our own experiences. We are not researchers. What we share today may not represent all of Hmong women's experiences, but we do encourage you to continue to share your story. For ourselves, it's really about that accurate tapestry that we're all weaving together. And this is especially true with our LGBT community and non-binary individuals. Thank you guys for being present for this panel. And we understand that there's still a lot of work to be done. And also, I wanted to mention that we are going to aim for 3:45 and leave a little bit of time at the end for question and answer. Go ahead and put in the chat your questions, and we'll try to collect them and then address them at the end. So thank you guys again. All right. So PK and Cindy, just kind of to start us off, in celebration of Women's History Month, want to kind of just ask you both, as we know, our parents, our mothers specifically, carry the history of our people. What's something that your mother has taught you about history? Cindy, would you like to start?
Me? Are we going to go start with me? Okay. Yeah. So just to begin, I am referring to my birth mom. So I have my mom who gave birth to me. She passed away almost 8 years ago, and then I have my mother now, okay, and she has entered my life almost a little over 7 years ago. And so she has taught me a lot of things about Hmong women's history from her unique lens and her set of experiences as well. But for purposes of today, I am going to be referring to my birth mom. Okay. So when I thought about this, it took me back to, just shortly after a conversation I had with both my parents, so my mom and my dad, shortly after I got married. They had pulled me and my husband together, and they were giving, their words of wisdom, like a lundonaya. So my dad's words were very focused on love your husband, love each other, go lead a good life so that they is your side of the family, we can so we can have faith. And then also just a tiny layer of I understand that your generation is different from me and your mom's generation. You guys like to help each other out in the kitchen and doing all these different things, but at least wake up early enough to make coffee with my dad. And it's funny because if my husband is listening in, he will laugh about that. But my mom, when it was her chance to she told me a story. She told me about her story of starting out, and being married to my father. My mom is the youngest daughter of Love in her side of the family. And then my dad was an orphan. So in a sense, they started off very young. So my mom told me a story of great hardship, right? A story of great hardship steeped in hard work, working hard, building the life you want to have, and not succumbing to failure in a sense. And so, and how she went and joined my father's life and just transformed it to where it was at that point. At the point that I got married, my mom was in a sense living in her dream home at that point. And so when I think about that conversation and I think about what did I pull from it that taught me about Hmong women's history, it pulled two things. One, that Hmong women carry a significant pressure when it comes to building and maintaining the success of the life that they lead with their married partner. They carry a very big and significant pressure to do that. Okay, so that was one. The second thing that I learned from that, and this may be my more, Hmong American brain going into this, but the second thing I learned from that was that if it is indeed the Hmong women are able to have that significance of influence, okay, in the success of the life that they lead with the life that they build and lead with their married partner, okay, then it must also mean that Hmong women hold significant power. To have significant influence, you've got to have significant power. But perhaps the issue is that when that power is paired with great insecurity, fear, and trauma, then the Hmong woman can be seen as quite scary and something to be controlled. And so that is the two things that I really pulled from that conversation specific to that.
Oh, that's so interesting, Cindy. Just to add a little bit, one time I did hear this and I thought it was so magnificent. They were just saying, in truth, women are they're the ones that birth, right? The generation, the nation state. And so when we talk about these, maybe even social political identities, it comes from the womb, it comes from the womanhood. And I always imagine wow, just like you said, that's a lot of power. A lot of and you know, I think you kind of commented a little bit about perhaps that's why there is some struggle to see it. There are these barriers that have been put in place as if to maybe to control, right? Right. PK, how about yourself?
You know, I can relate to Cindy's story and perhaps her mother's upbringing. My mother's, you know, history was similar in that in her days, this was during the Vietnam War, it was about survival mode. It was about fighting for, fighting to be alive. I mean, we fled our home country to escape persecution. And this was during the Vietnam War. My father fought alongside General Vinh Pao on behalf of, you know, the United States. And she didn't have the kind of luxury we have now. It was about waking up at before the crack of dawn. My mother's role was about gathering and farming, feeding the family. She didn't have that kind of opportunity to do what we do now. So one thing she's always taught me is, you know, back in my days, you know, we held a wheat cutter and a shovel, right? And that's how we made a living. Now for you, your job is to hold a pencil and go to school. And so she's always taught me that, you know, your future is up to you and, you know, how you want it to be. So, you know, times have changed and, you know, we definitely have more opportunities now than the women back there in Laos. And, you know, women can go to school now. We have that opportunity to better ourselves.
What do they say? You right now, right?
Yeah.
We work really hard, not with hard labor so much, but maybe a little bit more of like the hard work with our brains.
Yes, right. Like now it's not about physical work. It's about using your brain to get what you need to accomplish things. So that's one lesson that has always stuck with me is, you know, we're very fortunate to be in a country where we have those opportunities. And it's not that, you know, only like back then, it could have been that like only boys were allowed to go to school or that their families can afford for them to go to school. And the women were, you know, the caretakers. And in the Hmong culture, you know, this belief that, you know, if you let the daughter go to school, you know, she's going to exit someday from the family, and then she's going to take all of her knowledge with her to support her new family. So, you know, all these different perspectives, and, you know, we are living in a world that is different.
And I think we might speak about it in a later question as well, but like reminding us as you two are speaking, how in so many ways the Hmong women is a collective identity as well as it is an individual, right? So while you two are sharing your stories, I was thinking, oh, my mom's story too, you know, crossing the Mekong River. That year, fortunately, unfortunately, I love my brother. He was born that year. And it was a really tough time for my mom. And so I keep thinking like that is her story, but in so many ways, that's the story of a lot of Hmong women. And so kind of keeping that idea that even though we today sit in this panel, we're saying these are our individual stories, there is some semblance of a collective, right? Awesome.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah. And I truly, I'm sorry, like, and I truly believe that we're not separate, like we're not a separate self like this. We are the result of, you know, of what brought us here. I mean, we can't talk about our identity without talking about that. I mean, that all had to happen in order for us to be here today.
PK, I'm in total agreement, right? These push and pull factors that brought us to this country, whether they were always positive or, you know, components of it was not so positive. We're here and, you know, we're providing mental health services, you know, we're service providers. So, okay.
Right.
as Hmong women, ladies, what got you interested in mental health? Like, who were some of your Hmong women or even women who have inspired you to be therapists?
PK, you want to go first? Sure. Went first on the last one.
Sure. So, I want to say that the most influential woman figure in my life has been my mother. Through her words, actions, behaviors, just words of wisdom. She's really taught me that, again, my future is in my hands, and I determine what I want my future to look like. Growing up, I witnessed and I experienced a lot of family conflicts. I've always told myself that I didn't want to continue that pattern of unhealthy habits. I wanted to be the change. And so I took it upon myself to, learn more about family dynamics, learn about what healthy communication is. Most importantly, heal, right? Heal in order to heal my own wounds, in order to provide that space for other people. Because I truly feel that until you've done the work on yourself, your work with others is not going to be effective. So for personal reasons, I wanted to be that change in my family, and it just didn't work for me. And I'm sure we all have our stories, our own details to it. But those were some motivating factors for me.
Okay, that was so powerful. That resonated so strongly with me. Mm-hmm. And Cindy, who are some that influenced you as well?
Okay. So PK, that really that resonated with me as well. I think for me, I was like, some of my closest friends and families will probably know that like my motto in life is, dream fearlessly, change the world. And so I think that in terms of what got me interested in mental health, I think growing up, because we can't talk about this journey without going to childhood. So like growing up, witnessing, seeing the pain and sorrow that I saw in Hmong women, and then similarly in Hmong men, a similar type of pain that was also there. I'm kind of optimistic by nature, so believing that there's got to be something else out there that can help, that can help our community grow. And so seeing that, and then specifically, I must say that when I was in high school, and I think if I mentioned this, probably our viewers would know what I'm referring to, but in my which would be like early 2000s, Fresno Bee had released an article. It was about 14 Hmong teenagers that had died by suicide within a year and a half. I remember that article. That story has stuck with me since. At the time, I was a high school kid, and I wrote an op-ed that I would probably be quite embarrassed to read now as a 35-year-old woman I am now. But, it really did stick with me. And I think, and perhaps that's why, I work with children and teenagers so much too, is because of seeing that, like such young lives, and children being the future, such young lives being lost at such a young age. So definitely that. And then when it comes to women, and I mean, back to PK, the piece of definitely, my mother and my three sisters, those three has really just inspired me and helped me want to continue in this field. And now my daughter as well. So as a therapist, I know I've really transformed and changed in the last 3 years that I've had my daughter. So.
Oh. It's so funny so when my brother was in his undergrad, he was going to UC UC Santa Barbara. And he had partnered with one of the authors there, and they collected my parents' story. The book title is Hmong Means Free. Okay, this is the funny story. My sister Tang's always like, Lane, I think you need to read this book, right? I was like, I don't have time. I don't have time. It wasn't until I got into college and UC Davis, and I took one of those like Southeast Asian experience classes, and this book comes up, and I'm reading. I'm like, those are my parents. And so, I mean, there's humor in it, and then there's that piece of like this also like this idea of us having to reclaim parts of our history that are kind of invisible to us. That how come my parents didn't tell me? I had to learn it through academia. But what was great about it is definitely opened the doors for me to ask a lot more questions from my dad and mom. That story about the Exodus, right? The story of migration. And kind of to comment a little bit too, Cindy, about what you said, do you both kind of wonder if, and this is a little different, but do you two also wonder if there is some components of trauma as our community acculturates?
That with acculturation, there's trauma with it.
Yeah, like as a word, it means well, right? It's like, oh, acclimating, there's that positive stuff. But, all the time that I've been with the Living Well Center too, my first years I was collecting my hours, there was trauma, right? Not being able to speak the language, having your child translate for you. The child itself, right? They're at the medical office and they're getting exposed to things about their parents that they're like, I don't know what that is. Just these little nuances that, also, if anything, colored that experience of acculturation. What do you guys think about that?
So 2020 was the pandemic, right? It hit. And so I did a ton of reading in that year. And I promise it's related. So I read the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. Read it front to back, probably one of the most life-changing, shifting books for me. There is a chapter in there about acculturation. And that has shifted my view on it. I think that absolutely, if you feel like the only way that I can survive or the only way that I can keep up with this extremely fast-paced, changing world that I now live in, because I have no home to go back to, and is to let go of everything that I knew, that is trauma. That is very traumatic. And so there is a lot of pain in that. And a lot of what, at that time, perhaps there were people that were like, I just got to gloss over this pain and get going, so that I can survive. So yeah, that would be my view, my response to that follow-up question.
Oh, great book. I didn't even get to read that. I just got the overview. That was good. PK, what do you think?
I agree with both of you. I mean, these traumatic experiences, when you don't take care of it, it gets passed down to many generations to come. So I look back at my family and, my mom is a highly anxious person, right? And I get it. In her time zone, it was about fleeing at any given second. Mm-hmm. It was about, again, survival. So I think with her, she's stuck in this like anxiety state all the time, this fight or flight mode. And so, until you take care of that, it's gonna get passed down. And I think I get a lot of my anxiety from my mom, whether, because behavior is learned, right? Sometimes it's not like, it's more you learn from behaviors. And so I can kind of say that some of that anxiety got transferred over to me and my siblings, but it gets passed on.
And PK, I think a little bit about what you're kind of speaking about is like this kind of a transfer of like generational trauma. I think words we've used is like secondary trauma as well. And then I think some of the new stuff is also like epigenetics. This idea that like, for example, like traumas get stored in the body and can be passed down from one generation to the next. Are we grateful that therapy becomes one of those things that could be a possible solution for that, though? There's hope.
So
Sure.
I hope that.
Can you say it one more time, Cindy?
Yeah. So I hope that we can kind of talk a bit more about healing. I specialize in trauma. I love to work with, treat trauma. And so can't treat trauma without acknowledging the epigenetics, how that shapes gene expression. And now that it has shaped gene expression, how that goes on to go down to our, and not saying that, oh, now it's a hopeless case. We'll never be able, children will always, they want of like, right? Yeah. Now, it's not to say that you can never, ever, make a shift or change because it's written in gene code. There's a lot of things that can go to shape experience. So, and empathy is really one of those. So.
I like that. Considering epigenetics as you address trauma. Yeah, powerful stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to kind of just touch base a little on this, if you two are okay to sharing. What's both of your journeys towards healing? PK, did you want to start?
Sure. So I've had to do my own, make time to get my own, treatment and also get my own therapy to deal with a lot of my own stuff, starting from childhood. But, it's an ongoing process. It takes time. It takes time to heal and change. And you've got to be willing to try it. And first, willing to acknowledge that something needs to be changed in your life. But it's been a long journey. It's still in the process. I'm constantly learning every day about myself. I like to think that, when I'm working with difficult clients, it's not that I'm learning from them. It's that they're teaching me something about myself. And so I'm bringing that to session, and I'm constantly working on that for myself. And, it's a journey. Life is a journey, and it's not a destination. So that's been my experience.
Yeah, the healing journeys, like you're in the middle or even still always at the beginning. Not quite at the end yet, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And Cindy, how about yourself?
PK, you make me think of reciprocal healing, the work that we do in our clients. Healing.
You sound kind of garbled.
Garbly?
Yeah, audio.
Okay. Am I still pretty garbly now?
You're a little bit better now.
Am I a little bit better? Okay. Had to give a minute. Okay. So when I think of healing, much like what PK, think of it's a journey, and healing takes time, and the beauty of it is just to begin it, however way it looks. So when I'm a deeply reflective person, I think you kind of develop that as therapists. But think of healing. It actually I think back to my very first experience was with others. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old, and I remember so I remember like I'm in bed on top of your chonba. So I remember that like that. You know, I don't, as an 8-year-old, I have no clue what the issue was. Clearly something was seen, and it needed to be healed. And so there was a for me, and I knew that. And then I got older, really engaged in creative arts, writing. I discovered writing, the power of using writing to help me maintain. I think as a child, I was probably a pretty depressed and anxious kid. And so using, writing was my outlet. I first discovered the word playwright, and I started writing plays. So hence, from that point all through, I got my undergraduate in theater arts as well. And all of the practices that were very, very healing for my soul. My art reflects on in here. In terms of the component onto that healing, I officially began therapy in 2010. Was in therapy for a couple of years to anxiety, and I had for years, as far back as I can remember, so I went to address that. Went for a couple of years, felt like it was time to stop, stepped away. Mom passed away in 2014. I went back to therapy at the beginning of 2015 to address specifically piece around was in therapy for about a year, a little over a year as well. And then stepped away. I was in a good place, and went back in 2019. End of 2019. At the end of 2019, and this time to address trauma and childhood trauma. I went and I worked with a BIPOC who also utilizes EMD and really address trauma wounds. And it's amazing. We kind of weaned off. I'm in what is maintenance phase now, so I only go back as needed. I no longer buy my kids, so that's my healing journey.
Yeah.
So that would, So I must say, this is I am now is kind of like, wow, I can finally feel things that I never thought was possible. So that is my healing journey. I don't know what's to come in the next, you can't predict the future, but feeling like I can handle what's to come. Yeah.
I think for myself, one of the things that, so Cindy was talking about, definitely like healing journeys and kind of going back, and that's all right. For myself, what started the journey too was initially one of my really good friends from high school. So she was murdered, and I got all tripped up. It was a really tough time. I think that was pretty jarring. I felt pretty sheltered in some ways, I guess. And then after that happened, it was like things got very real and very fast. And it was really tough for me. It was tough for my friends. And so I went into service to address that. But as we all know, those are presenting problems. What came out of therapy was this beautiful concept that so for many years now, I was grassroots organizing. So I was like, okay, we got to work on these things. These are social issues, social ills that we want to address. We talked about mobilizing communities, all that stuff. What I didn't realize, and maybe my fellow advocates in the room as well, is I was burning my candle on both ends. We were wounded warriors, right? These are very similar words. But I was not seeking my own healing. So I was just burning out, and I was exhausted, both spiritually, psychologically, emotionally. And so after seeking services, I walked out knowing that, oh my goodness, if I want my communities to flourish, I need to really, the basis of it is not just social justice. It's not just, accountability like that. we really need to invest in mental health. Mental health had to be a basic human right. And that is like one of our building blocks for, like, even for me, Fresno County to flourish. It just has to be, because it's preventative as well. So if we think about trauma in like Fresno County, how much we see in our communities of color, imagine if we just gave a whole bunch of mental health services. We could heal an entire community, and then they could really maybe, you know, pursue things that they really wanted to. So for me, I just saw one thing, and then I was like, what about these things? And so I guess that part of me just never left, but it was always about access, mental health, that being like a basic right. So that like one little thank you to that therapist, wherever he is right now.
I think I think I just kind of want to highlight like what we're talking about right now is that change really starts with us. Right? Like it's not that we want the world to change, but before we can do that, we have to first look at what we can change, what we do have control of, and then we can start from there. But that's a very important message that I want our viewers to understand too, that, you know, I think a lot of times we blame others for the predicament we're in. At the same time, we also have to think about what we do have control of. And therapy is just not for someone with problems, right? That's the misconception. Therapy is, I would say, for everyone who has a brain, you know, who wants to be a better version of themselves. So I highly encourage everyone and all to, you know, don't be ashamed, you know, get help if you need it.
You know, so PK, you bring up, you know, I have this joke, and if my therapist happens to be tuning in, she herself may laugh because I say this all the time, but I would say, like, I'm just trying to change my epigenetics. Okay.
That's good.
Right.
That's really good.
We talked about epigenetics, right? We talked about like how trauma passes down through the generations, how it shapes our gene expression. It doesn't shape our gene code, but trauma and the things that happen in the environment can turn off and on gene markers, right? Wonderful book by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, The Deepest Well, read it. Talks all about that. But like engaging in this healing work is one way to, in a sense, stop that transmission. And so now, you know, especially after, you know, having my children, I have 3, and then especially since having my daughter, because, you know, if you really want to experience transference or countertransference, like look at your children, okay? So seeing them and being like, wow, you know, you're so beautiful, and how can I create a better life for you? What can I do? I have all this knowledge and awareness that trauma is carried in this way, and that it's carried in me too. You know, so what do I need to do with me so that, you know, if things end, so that the apples can stop falling off the tree, then how do I do that? And so to me, you know, therapy, the specific to therapy and how that's healing, because it's different. Healing looks differently and across communities and across cultures. And so for me, you know, healing specific to this type of therapy, this mental health therapy, to me, it's a very like abstract, felt internal process. Like I feel it's almost at a very spiritual level.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And just to reiterate both of your points, like PK, you said it so strongly, like the idea of, you know, if you have a brain, therapy is going to be magical for you. So you don't have to have like a big thing happen. If you break your leg, you see a doctor. If you're having trouble, see your therapist.
Totally.
And Cindy, I loved your joke. That was good. that, and healing looks differently. So I know we shared our own journeys, but in truth, y'all, like sometimes it's not pretty at first, but it is necessary.
Yeah. That's what you're willing to look at. That's what you're willing to go through to get to the other side, right? And pain is not comfortable. If anything, we want to avoid it, right? We want to say, it's not happening, let's, put it under the rug, put it on the shelf or whatever. But it has its own way of sneaking up on us, right? And those are the very things that it's going to get in the way. It's going to trip you up in your relationships, in your daily functioning, right? So it's so important to just be aware of those things.
We have just a little bit more. I wanted to at least close out with this question. So, we began this panel, really talked about our mothers, and I wanted to just kind of examine our relationships with our sisters, our nieces, our own daughters. What would you like them to know about the healing arts, mental health?
I would say, oftentimes we think that if we take time away, if we make any kind of time for us, that's seen as, selfish or whatnot. But I would go against that. I would say, take care of you in order to be there for the people that you love. And that change has to start with you, right? I always use this metaphor with my patients. If the plane was going to crash, and you needed to put an oxygen mask on someone, who would you put it on first? You can't put it on your child because then you wouldn't have enough oxygen to help your child. So it's always this help yourself first before you can try to help others. And that's what the healing arts is it allows you to work on you, right? And things show up, things reveal themselves to you through your work. And that's when you need to work on those issues.
Cindy, how about yourself?
So when I think about this, because I have a daughter, obviously, and I have sisters, and I have nieces as well. And so I just, I would just like to send the message that, that you engage in that healing. We've kind of talked about healing looking different ways, and so I really do hope that you begin that journey. And if, and perhaps if you begin reflecting on it, okay, you begin that reflecting. You may have been engaging in some sort of healing already. Hence, you're still here. You're still, you're still waking up. You're still moving, so that, maybe that healing is already being done, but perhaps we need to amplify the voice of that healing. And then, specifically, say each Hmong Thai na ya. So to all, not to all of, our Hmong we're very community. So to all of y'all Thai would be considered, my sisters, okay, and then also my nieces across the board. I am a young to many girls out there. And then, I am considered a mother to many girls out there as well, including my own daughters. So I really hope that, a part of healing is acceptance, being able to let go. And so I really hope that you do the work, or you find where that work is to be able to accept, let go, and perhaps even forgive those who, overtly or covertly, perpetrated pain on Hmong women and the Hmong women in your life. And probably I would say this to not just Hmong women, but to our Hmong men as well. We are a very oppressed, we are a very traumatized community. The more I learn about trauma and what it is and how it comes up in our day-to-day life, how it comes up at work, how it shows up in our relationship, how it shows up in our friendship, all of that. Hmong is a very, very traumatized community. We cannot tell the story of the Hmong people without talking about oppression, without talking about genocide, without talking about displacement, without talking about losing your home. And so thinking about that and knowing that trauma also passes down through the generation, we cannot talk about, we need to do that healing for ourselves. So we talk about wanting to develop, I meet many community organizers and advocates out there. We talk about wanting to develop this new moral compass, or all of that, right? We talk about or something like that, a new moral compass, a new way of being. But we can't do that work if we don't engage in our own internal healing. And so, it's otherwise we will be whiteballing ourselves through it. And that is very painful, okay? To inhere in your heart, in your thoughts, heart and body, to be like, oh, it wants to do this other thing, but then having this strict set of rules that says, but I will not engage in this, but then in here, I'm firing up all over the place. That's really hard to live like that. And so, the healing work, it may be scary. It may take time, but I do believe it's something that's worth investing in. For yourself, for your children, for our future generations to come, because they're going to come. And then I think, my daughter specifically, I just hope that, she's too young to hear or tune into this, but I just hope that as your mom, as that I have built a legacy that you will be proud of and will want to tell one day, and that you're strong enough to build your own legacy, So, yeah.
Ooh. Like that piece. I've never heard it done that way. So I was like, oh, what is this? Cindy, you said whiteballing?
Whiteballing, yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The idea of the necessity
or
of
white
healing
knuckling. Yeah.
White knuckling. Yeah, the
knuckling.
idea of healing ourselves before we can take on the healing of a community. And sometimes it's simultaneously, because when the community heals, our identities heal too. But without addressing it, like Cindy said, it's a tough work and it hurts. So I just want to bring us over to the chat area here. It looks like there might not be questions, but some commentary. And Cindy, if you could be so kind as to read the Hmong part, I would appreciate it.
So absolutely, yes. So at 3:15 p.m., we got a comment that says, my mom used to tell me, so that was probably to you, PK, and what you were referring to, I think.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about how, we're no longer using physical work. Now we're using brain work, mental work. Okay. Makes sense.
Elaine, do you want to go over kind of the other comments that are on there?
So a few of the other comments, just to share, is they had to let go of everything. They love, and then as new Americans, their identities. So I think that kind of speaks to this idea that we had spoken earlier, right? new Americans, like this acculturation, this refugee status, all good stuff, coming to a first world country. But we forget that, learning a new language, like we spoke about, all these things can add up to trauma ourselves. And I still remember not being able to speak Hmong in class. So that was when that English only law existed. So I got punished for speaking Hmong, but Hmong was the only language I knew at the time. Yeah. That's not true now, but my Hmong is it was those spaces, right, that you just didn't think about. And ladies, just jump in. I'm just going to read them.
Okay.
So the other one is trauma. I'm guessing your race and my race has different types of trauma. Still, it's trauma. My daughter and my granddaughter are learning how to deal with stress and anxiety, and I am hoping they didn't get that from me. We think of things not in causation. So it's not like a linear thing where it was something, my mom likes the color blue and then I like the color blue. When we talk about epigenetics, I think, Cindy, if you wanted to speak more about that expression versus that.
So I want to begin by saying that there is no real cause and effect. I think, to the piece about trauma is trauma. Trauma is very individual to the person. Okay, that's what we learned about trauma. That absolutely we have the big T trauma, okay, which is referring to things like severe car accidents, war trauma, sexual violence, those things, absolutely. But we also have what's called small T trauma, which is very individual to the person as well. This is adversity. This is anything that shows up as, intensely stressful, intensely disturbing, how we see and we view this, okay, that it has created an experience for us where me as an individual, it's hard for me to think about that, okay? It's so hard for me to think about that I don't want it to slip in, okay? So, we know that our life experiences, and we now know that our life experiences, and again, I'm not a researcher, I read a lot of research, okay? So, and I love to read in general. So we know that our life experiences can change how our genes are expressed. So if there is someone out there who is tuning in and listening to this and wants to add a comment around this, please do. If I do not speak of it accurately, or if Ling and PK, you guys have heard differently, definitely speak in. But what happens is the things that have happened to us will turn on and off certain genes. So for example, if we have a gene that, say it's a gene for happiness, okay? And so it turns off the marker on the gene. So then if it turns off the marker on the gene, then that gene can then pass down. And so then it starts to look like, I just have this feeling. So I want to explain what intergenerational trauma feels like to me, because I do a lot of my own internal work. It's like you can feel the pain of your right? So what they have, and I'm going to go metaphorical because I don't think I can talk about intergenerational trauma without going metaphorical, okay? So como sai tie ko ho ko lúc cậu na ko chi a chi, okay? Ko lúc cậu ko chi a chi ku ho ku lúc cậu ku chi, my own direct experiences, okay? So I have my own direct experiences, and then perhaps just I'm neurologically wired certain ways. I specialize in high sensitivity as well. So we know that with highly sensitive people, there is a layer where, because we do process things so deeply, there are certain things that we will just internalize a little bit deeper. So, neurologically, the things that I'm pre-exposed to goes in there. Okay, perhaps I work with children and young age. So I'm thinking also about like infant mental health stuff. Okay, so you're looking at like, okay, I was born early and had a really traumatic birth. Okay, the umbilical cord is wrapped around my neck, and I couldn't breathe. Well, all of that stays in us because we're only one person. You know, we didn't inherit another body. So that's how our body remembers things. So then we add all of those pieces and layers. And then now let's also add in Kuluka, my mom had to was completely displaced from her home. Okay. She experienced rape in the process of crossing over. Okay. Which that is the true story. Okay. That there are many Hmong women who experienced rape and the process of coming over to this country, that they, you know, it gets added in there. We feel that pain. It is a felt feeling. And so perhaps it's more so about like, maybe it's not so much that I caused the pain of my child, because if that was the case, then how is it that you love them so much? I don't know. You know, so feel free to add on to that. But you know how there is so much that can go into what brings up stress and anxiety. So it is a condition, and you know, how do we move forward with this? So I do want to clear that piece up if it, you know, and if it's very scary, but that is, you know, we don't necessarily talk about cause and effect, but perhaps there's a correlation that it just happened by chance that a lot of the data that was around this, that it showed this as well.
Right, like you're more susceptible to, you know, versus like A caused B and therefore C occurred. It tends not to look like that, the relationships. Yeah. I did want to just notice the time, and I want to read the last question. Okay. In your development as a counselor, what is something you learned about yourself that changed how you show up today? I don't know, PK, if you wanted to start.
Great question. So in my journey of becoming a therapist, my patients have taught me a lot about myself. And one of the lessons I learned about myself is that I need to work on my patience. I need to work on my anxiety. And that often shows up in the room where I'm talking a lot, right? I'm talking a lot to fill the empty spaces. And so with me, that just didn't sit right. Like, why do I feel like I have to talk? Like, why do I feel the need to want to avoid the silence? And so part of what I've learned about myself is that I've had to practice a lot of self-compassion, loving kindness towards myself, a lot of mindfulness breathing. But it's shaped who I am today because of those practices that I do on my own outside of session, even in session too. But just learning about yourself and being willing to open up that piece of you, that vulnerable piece of you, like, and exploring what that really means is very, what is that word I'm looking for? It's very powerful. Something I learned about myself is learning to be patient with myself.
So we have about 2 minutes. Cindy, if you wanted to just comment.
Can you repeat the question again? I think I lost it in listening to PK's part.
In your development as a counselor, what is something you've learned about yourself that has changed how you show up today?
That's a very powerful question. So thank you to whoever asked that. I think, you know, I had mentioned reciprocal healing earlier. So, you know, I read an article sometime in the last year about why therapists continue to be in this field. And there is, you know, we do gain, you know, after like doing it, like, why do you keep doing it day in, day out, year after year? And there is a layer in there where I gain something from it. And I heal along as my clients are healing. I am healing along with them. You know, in the therapy world, we have this term, and both of you probably know this very well, but in this therapy world, we have, you know, we believe that clients walk in our door for a reason. There's a reason why that client showed up, right? And so I can't help but agree with that, because it seems like the thing I need to work on happens to coincide with the client that walks in through my door. And so that I can try to want all these other clients, but then the client that I need is going to come to me. So I think in terms of how I show up, honestly, I'm a more integrated person. I am more sincere in how I show up in all the places that I show up. I am not just a therapist. I am a mom. I am a nya. I am a nyahlo. I am I'm a wife. I am a sister. I'm an auntie. I have many, many roles and hats that I put on, and I get to show up in a way that I feel is fitting for me. And I don't feel like, I need to, not saying that I don't get nervous or scared or anything, but I get to show up as me. And so I'm definitely more integrated and connected as a person. So.
Thank you, ladies, so much. It is that time. So I'm just going to say thank you to Department of Behavioral Health for letting us host this. Ladies and I had a good conversation prior to this panel as well. So thank you, PK. Thank you, Cindy, for taking the time to, show up, be present. And Dennis, I think it's back to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for this really spirited, very, very in-depth conversation about Hmong women and mental health. Thank you to PK, Lang, and Cindy. Thank you to all those who viewed us on Facebook and on YouTube, and for all the comments and questions. A reminder that these will be available to view anytime you like on YouTube and Facebook. And if you'd like to get in contact with any of our panelists, please feel free to reach out to the department and we can connect you. So with that said, again, we just thank you so much. There's been a lot of love in the chats that's come through, lots of hearts, thank you for this conversation, comments. So we really, really appreciate this, and we can't wait to do something like this as a follow-up. Awesome. Thank you, ladies, so much, and thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great afternoon, all.
Bye.